5 o'clock by the official clock in the council chamber, and I call the July 2018 work session of the Portsmouth City Council to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark. Here. Mrs. Lucasberg. Here. Mr. Moody. Here. Ms. Simmons. Here. Mr. Smith. Dr. Whitaker. Mayor Rowe.
Here. And I'll remind my colleagues and explain to the public that the reason why we're meeting in the council chamber tonight, we have 2 appeals from the Historic Preservation Commission that we'll hear tonight. Once we dispense with these 2 appeals, we do have other items on our work session agenda, and then we'll change the venue and move from here to our council conference room. Tonight, again, we have 2 appeals. We'll allow 10 minutes for the applicant to explain. Then we'll have 10 minutes for the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission to explain the action of the Historic Preservation Commission. And then council will have 10 minutes to discuss the matter and then consider taking action to either uphold the appeal or to reverse it. The city clerk, Deborah White, will be the timekeeper. And let's see, have I missed anything, Madam Clerk? Okay. With that, we'll go to the first item, which is an appeal pertaining to certain property in Port Norfolk. And Madam Clerk, would you read the action request?
Yes,
the
sir.
Requested action, please.
Yes, sir. Eric O. Moody seeks to appeal the Historic Preservation Commission's decision to deny his request to retain vinyl replacement windows that were installed using an incorrect certificate of appropriateness certificate on property located at 101 Mount Vernon Avenue in the historic Port Norfolk neighborhood. And
this appeal comes to us because this request was denied by the Historic Preservation Commission. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Okay, with that, is the applicant present? And sir, you have 10 minutes. Would you state your name and address, please?
My name is Eric Moody.
Yes, sir.
And I own the property at 101 Mount Vernon Avenue.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to present our case with regard to this particular appeal. This is property located right at the corner of Bayview Avenue and Mount Vernon Avenue. It was originally built in 1941. I purchased the property in 1991 and have largely used it as rental property since that time. In 2014 and towards the middle of 2015, August of 2015, I contracted to have the property completely renovated. I installed all new utilities, HVAC, redid the floors, and of course installed new windows. The contractor, Mr. Wayne Young, who's here this evening, and I'm going to ask him to speak, did in fact initially install windows that were not in compliance with the Historic Commission's regulations. Those windows were taken out of the home, and a certificate of appropriateness was obtained for complying windows. The work was completed in January of 2017, and at that particular point, I continued to look for tenants and possibly try to have the property rented. It wasn't until some 8 months later that I got a notice of non-compliance, and quite frankly, I thought it was a mistake in as much as some 8 months had gone by, and no mention had been made of any problem with the windows. I then, of course, contacted Ms. Joycelyn Aduma and let her know that I was totally surprised that there was a problem with regard to the windows. The whole idea was to beautify the home and also add some beauty to the neighborhood. And I have some pictures of how the home looks now with the windows that I'd like for council to take a look at. The windows that were installed in the property when I purchased it were apparently the windows that were installed when the house was built in 1941. So needless to say, they needed to be replaced. And I understood that it would require some compliance with the look of the previous windows. Obviously, the windows that have been installed are of much better quality than that which was there. The appeal is based, Mr. Mayor and members of council, on the fact that I've been totally blindsided by this, and there's been a substantial amount of time that has transpired over the course of getting the appropriate permit, appealing to the Historic Preservation Commission. That hearing was held back in September of last year, and it wasn't until obviously this evening that we have been able to actually get this appeal heard. So we're going on some 2.5 years since I began this project. My goal is, in fact, to comply. We would ask if there is a determination that some technicality has not been followed, that it be waived, and as much as I do believe this particular property is one of the most attractive properties in that community. I've been a businessman in this city for 40 years, have paid taxes. Most of my employees work in this city, and obviously I care very much about what goes on in the city of Portsmouth. I would then defer to Mr. Wayne Young, who was the contractor on the job. He's a Class A contractor, and he can give you the timeline of what transpired with regard to the application.
Yes, sir. And for the record, would you state your name and address, please?
Wayne Young, 501 Claxton Creek Road in Seaford, Virginia.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, council. I'm a contractor in the state of Virginia. I've been in business for 27 years. My only motive is to seek satisfied customers in what I do. If they're not happy, I'm not happy. I had no intentions of initially putting in windows that didn't meet standard. This is my first piece of property that I've worked on that was in a historic district, and because of that, the windows that were installed the first time were not appropriate. However, the second set of windows that were installed are composition wood. As a matter of fact, the windows that are installed are the windows that I asked for the city or the historic district to give me brochures on so that I could purchase those windows and install them. I didn't go looking for any other windows other than the windows that they had already approved in any other way. So those are the windows that are in right now. However, they might not have seen me take the old windows out, but the windows that are in there right now comply with the historic district. And I'm a little insulted that they would even think that I have any other suspicious meanings of installing windows without their permission. But I did everything according to protocol, and I was just as surprised as Attorney Moody when it comes to them calling us back to seek permission to something that we've already got permission to do. I've got all my paperwork, I've got my permits, I've got everything that's required to install those windows. And I'm seeking the same request that Attorney Moody is seeking, just to put this to closure in a modest way.
And we would also submit, there was a certificate.
Could you speak in the mic, please?
We would also want to submit the certificate of appropriateness that was approved for the second set of windows. This was back on October 18, 2016. Those windows were installed, I believe, in November and December of 2017, and the job was completed in January of January of 2017. So these windows have been there since for over a year. That will be all we have, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Thank you. I'll ask my colleagues on council, do you have any questions? Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, just want to make sure from the city attorney, this is a de novo hearing, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. And so just want to make sure that that means that we're not just reviewing whether the Historic Preservation Commission made any type of error, but we can also take into account what has occurred throughout the whole process. Is that correct?
Council, you are, as an appellate body, in the same position that the HPC was in. And so this is an appeal of the, it's a review of the HPC process, but it's de novo. So you stand in the same position that the HPC was in when they initially reviewed the matter. And by that, I mean, you're here to determine whether or not you agree with the decision that's been made with by the HPC.
Right, but I just want to make sure we're clear that that means that in our consideration, we can take into account not just whether there was some type of error committed, but the whole process that led up to this point.
To the extent that the ordinance provides.
So that's a yes, okay. Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Attorney Moody.
Yes, sir.
The certificate of appropriateness that you referenced, that was issued by the city, and also in reading the file, there was also a building permit that was issued by the city.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And in reading it, it stated that there was some error in issuing the building permit and the certificate of appropriateness. Was that brought to your attention?
Well, what I read in the summary from the Historic Preservation Commission appeal was that they said that the contractor did not inform the zoning staff that the permit was incorrect. And I know I've discussed this with Mr. Young, and of course,
Right.
it was not brought to his attention that it was incorrect before he installed the second set of windows.
But the point is that the city did issue the certificate of appropriateness, and the city did issue a building permit for those windows to be installed.
That's correct.
And so the windows were installed based on the authorization of the city. And so the Historic Preservation Commission is charged with interpreting the guidelines. And I would like to hear exactly which guideline it is that the Historic Preservation Commission is saying that the windows do not meet, because the windows were installed with the permission of the city. And so can we hear from, or do you know, Attorney Moody, what the guideline is?
I personally don't know. Maybe Mr. Young knows. I don't know myself. I don't know windows.
I'm thinking that whoever came down there to view the windows viewed them prior to me installing the new windows, and they documented that and stuck with that opinion, because the new ones are composition wood. I went down to the Historic Preservation Department just to pick this up to find out what type of windows do you want me to use, because I didn't want to waste any more time. We had enough time wasted on the house. So when they gave me this brochure, I called the company and ordered them. Mm-hmm. And from that point, I mean, it states on the invoice that they're composition wood, and from that point on, we just moved forward. And
we would submit this as well.
Please.
So I just wanted to make sure I was bringing up issues beyond just errors that may have been made at the Historical Preservation Committee.
There's one error that's noted in the description of the complaint, where it states that the contractor did not inform the zoning staff that a permit was incorrect. How do I know a permit is incorrect? It says the contractor used an erroneous certificate to obtain a building permit. Really? I wish I did know how to use an erroneous anything to get a permit. I would know that it was wrong for one thing, and I wouldn't do it. If this is an accusation that I deserve an apology.
Well, I saw that language, and I think the fact has been stated that there was a certificate of appropriateness and a building permit issued, and so you're not clear what the standard was that, or is, that was violated. So I guess we have to wait to hear from staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? None? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Council will now hear from the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. And, sir, you have 10 minutes. Would you come to the lectern and state your name and address, please?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. My name is David Stevenson. My address is 1 Harbor Court here in Portsmouth, and I am the chairman of Historic Preservation Commission. The questions, I think, are probably what I should start off with, because the information that we had was that the certificate of compliance was based on the windows that we saw, that the inspectors saw, and that's when there were vinyl windows there. The Historic Preservation Guidelines for Port Norfolk has on it that there can be no vinyl windows. They can be wood, which is what the original materials were, or they can be aluminum or vinyl clad. When they came to Preservation Commission the first time, it was because of the fact that we had seen, or that the inspectors had seen vinyl, and that they were seeking permission to go ahead and use that. We didn't hear anything after that, and the way that I see it here is that several days later, they did take the certificate into the zoning office, and the zoning office, since they didn't have a copy of the new one, they apparently, in a mistake and in an attempt to assist the contractor, looked into the system and created their certificate based on the denied application. So that permit was actually issued for an application that was for the product that couldn't be used there. As far as what happened after that, I think I can summarize it to say that the main thing is we have not had any contact, or at least I haven't seen anything, and Ms. Adumwa apparently hadn't had anything to show that those windows were taken out and that the proper clad windows were put in. So the information that we had was all based on what we had seen, what happened when the wrong the permit was given based on the wrong application.
Okay. Are you finished?
No, I would add that the Port Norfolk Historic District, it doesn't allow vinyl replacement windows. The contractor was aware that vinyl windows were not permitted when they were first put in. And there was a stop work order put out, and they did go ahead and do the work even with the stop order that was put out. And that's really pretty much all I could say on that.
Thank you, sir. We do have some questions, and
Okay.
I'll take them in order. The chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Mr. Stevenson,
Yes.
what windows are in the building now? Are the windows that meet the criteria?
If they
of
are indeed,
appropriateness?
if they are indeed the ones that Mr. Moody and the contractor were saying are in there now, that's that's the clad windows, which are okay.
Well, I guess my question is, has anyone gone out to verify that?
I haven't. I don't know if
I was
any
there.
inspector has or,
I was there this morning. Obviously, I'm not a contractor. To me, the windows look fine. They look like vinyl, but even composition windows can look like vinyl.
right.
So I don't see how we can render an opinion if we don't know whether they meet the criteria or not. It's a beautiful house. Mr. Moody described it perfectly. I mean, I think it's probably one of the nicer looking homes. But I would hate to render an opinion not knowing whether those windows are meeting the criteria or not. And I would think it's incumbent upon us to go there and look at it and come back to this council and let us know, are they the correct windows that are acceptable, or they're not? I mean, that's my opinion.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Vice Mayor Simmons, and I think she may have a question for the city manager.
Thank you, sir. It sounds to me like we're hearing an appeal for something that no longer exists. I too rode by. I too do not know enough about windows to know what they're made of. Everybody's correct. It's a beautiful house. It looks lovely. It's 5:22 right now. I would like to table this matter to the 7 o'clock meeting if the city manager told us that she could send someone knowledgeable on the issue physically to the house between now and our 7 o'clock meeting, and we add an agenda item to that meeting and take the vote at that time. Because if they're what Mr. Moody and his contractors say they are, I have no problem with approving or overturning the denial, which was on a different product, it sounds like.
The Vice Mayor has raised a question to Dr. Patton. Dr. Patton, can you send somebody out there to determine?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, yes, we will make a determination and be ready for the 7 o'clock meeting. And I, too, am baffled that this has not been reviewed since the package was put.
Yes.
So we will handle it. Thank you.
The chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, I would be actually against that type of investigation because we already have a certificate of appropriateness and a building permit. And council, one of the recommendations was going out and looking at it ourselves. I think that's why we have staff to do those things. And if a certificate and building permit were issued, then I think that's the investigative arm. My question to you, Mr. Stevenson, I would like to get some clarity on what the standard is as far as you mentioned that for the historic Port Norfolk community that vinyl windows are not allowed. Where is that standard?
That's actually in the guidelines for the Port Norfolk.
Is that the material guideline you're speaking of?
Right.
And the language in the material guideline, is that where you're referencing where it says in Port Norfolk you may consider using wood, rising composite, aluminum, or vinyl clad wood or fiberglass windows that meet the guidelines?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Well, and I think this is something that council may want to suggest to improving the language within the guidelines, because there's nowhere in that language where it says vinyl windows cannot be used. It actually says in Port Norfolk you may consider, and it's not a definite. It doesn't say you shall only or you may only consider. So there is some latitude there for vinyl windows to be used, and that's why I say I think the Historic Preservation Commission has to follow the guidelines. And here, the guidelines do not clearly state that vinyl windows, I thought there was some actual definite language that said vinyl windows cannot be used, but it uses the word you may. It says verb may consider, it doesn't say may only or shall. And so I think on the basis of that there's enough information before council right now for approval.
Thank you, sir.
And so I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, that language, if that's what's trying to be achieved, then that needs to be updated in the guidelines.
That's a good point. The chair recognizes someone who has not had the floor yet, Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the guidelines are clear. It tells you what you can use. It's not, it can't specify everything you can't use, but it's clear what you can use or may be used. So, and vinyl is not listed as something that can be used. So that part is clear to me anyway. But I guess I'm of the mind also, and I can't believe that no one from staff has gone back before this hearing to find out actually what's there. If there were vinyl originally and now they've gone back and put the right thing in, then this is moot. I mean, why are we here? So we obviously have to get this squared away, and I believe that someone has to confirm what's out there. You as chairman can't. If there's anybody on staff that can, then we need to hear from them.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Whitaker.
Yes. Yeah, once again, Mr. Mayor, I have an issue with the fact that we have a certificate of appropriateness. We have a building permit that was issued. The contractor followed it, put in the windows, and now the city is saying take them out, or the Historic Preservation Commission is saying take them out, when the contractor followed what the certificate of appropriateness approved and the building permit, nor is there any language in the guidelines, once again, that prohibits vinyl windows. And so I would think that we would honor the request of the contractor that these windows, and the owner, that these windows remain, given that the city authorized and approved the installation, and there's no language in the guidelines as written that prohibits it.
All right. In keeping with the order, we have 10 minutes for the applicant, 10 minutes for the Historic Preservation Commission. I don't think we have any further questions for the chairman. Is that correct? Okay, sir, then you can sit down, and it's now time for us to deliberate, and the chair recognizes you can sit down.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Simlis.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to make a motion to table the question until the 7 p.m. meeting tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion that's been duly made to table this matter to 7 o'clock and to confirm whether or not the current windows comply. Because this is a motion to table, there's no discussion, and we'll consider the question now. All in favor of the question, which is to table, the motion to table, vote yes, opposed no. It's not registered in my vote, but yes, it did. That motion carried. So this motion is tabled, sir, Mr. Moody, until 7 o'clock. The city manager will send somebody out to confirm I would suppose that the contractor and the applicant is welcome to meet the city person out there. Can we do that?
Yes, Mayor, Mrs. Abdullah will go and inspect them, and she's ready to leave now if necessary.
And we'll add this to the agenda, and I'm sorry for the delay. And by the way, I too looked at it, and it is a very attractive house. All right, which brings us to our second appeal And Madam Clerk, would you read the requested action, please?
Yes, sir. Kelly Pitts seeks, Pikes, I'm sorry, seeks to appeal the Historic Preservation Commission's decision to deny his request to retain alterations that were installed without obtaining a building permit or certificate of appropriateness on property located at 411 Mount Vernon Avenue in the historic Port Norfolk neighborhood.
Again, the ground rules for this consideration is that the applicant will have 10 minutes. The Historic Preservation Commission will have 10 minutes, and then council will take 10 minutes to deliberate. With that, the city clerk will be the timekeeper. And sir, you're the applicant?
Yes, sir.
If you would state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes, sir.
Yes, sir. My name is Kelly Pites. I live at 109 Nairn in Smithville, Virginia. Mr. Mayor and City Council, appreciate the opportunity to come forward with this appeal. And tell you a little bit myself first. I moved down here in 2011 from Northern Virginia as active duty military. I retired in 2013 as a lieutenant colonel out of the Army. During that time, after I moved down here, I started renovating houses on the side while my family was still up in Northern Virginia. And most of the houses I did 7 of them. They were in Newport News and Hampton area, to include Old Wythe. During those renovations, the way I saw doing renovations was a little bit different than most people that just flipped and got rid of the house. Is I put a quality house together, usually gutted it down to the studs, always followed the proper protocol and permitting process in those areas, and always tried to turn out a really quality house for somebody that probably couldn't afford a house of that quality in the neighborhoods that they were in. And which is probably why I didn't make very much money when I was flipping houses, and my realtor told me I was putting too much into them. But I didn't really care about that because I liked the quality that I was giving somebody. And that being said, in those areas, you didn't need a permit to put siding on a house. Even in Old Wythe, the permit wasn't required. And so I quit flipping houses because it was just getting too difficult for me once my family moved down. And I bought this house at 401 Mount Vernon. When I retired out of the Army, I used my TSP from the Army and I rolled it into a self-directed IRA to use for purchasing this house and have it as a rental. And so I had limited funds with that. The house was fully rented when I purchased it, and I purchased it for $67,000, and I maintained the tenants that were in it. During that time, I fixed a lot of things as they came up for the tenants. Both of them low income. The lady in the upstairs was fixed income, and ended up putting new appliances in and all sorts of things to make it a better quality house for both of them. Subsequently, she died about 4 months ago, so the upstairs unit is empty, and the downstairs unit, even in October when we had the initial hearing, he hadn't paid rent in a couple months, and I finally evicted him, but I was 6 to 8 months without rent from him as well. So the house is vacant now, and I use that opportunity to paint and fix the inside up so it's a better house for the next tenants that come in. Last September, after I owned the house for about a year, the exterior was in damage. It was asbestos siding, the tile asbestos, and it was chipping away, and we were finding pieces on the ground. The upstairs tenant had a grandson that was there a lot, and he was around the house, and so it was a hazard. And with asbestos, it's either remove it at an extreme expense or encapsulate it, to make it safe. And again, not knowing that vinyl siding needed a permit, and actually not knowing that it was a historic area, and just going off my previous experience, I went ahead and had a contractor start to put the siding up. The siding costs about $10,000 to have it, purchase it and have it installed. So I do apologize for not following the permitting and historical protocol. I didn't know about it at the time. I did receive a stop order on the siding, and they also noted on it that I had replaced the decking on the porch because, again, it was rotted, and the front door goes to the upstairs unit. She had told me that she almost stepped through it, so I came out and had my contractor replace it with normal decking, not the tongue and groove that was originally there. Since that stop order, the house was about 95% done with the siding. There was a few eaves that were not done yet. Over the winter, there was a rat problem. I had exterminators come in and put rat traps, but what was happening is they were chewing through some of the soffits, and I replaced the soffit and they'd chew through it again. So I had my contractor finish the wrap to stop that from happening, because the rats were getting into the upstairs unit. And so I wanted to stop that. The other issue was the contractors covered one of the windows in the front, because it was actually the window that behind it was the tub of the upstairs unit. When they renovated it into an apartment, that's where they put the tub. And so that window was in worse shape, and they just covered it up. And since then, I had them uncover it and fix that window. I have some photos here as well.
If you'll give them. Please give them to the Sergeant of Arms, please.
The cover photo is of how the house looks today, and then behind it are photos of houses on the 400 block and the 300 block of Mount Vernon Avenue. And of that, there's 19 houses that have vinyl siding on it in just the 2-block area. I didn't go any further than that. So virtually every house on those 2 blocks has vinyl siding, which was another reason why I didn't think that was an issue. Most of the houses had it. I thought that was kind of the standard of the house. My concern with removing the siding is not only the cost. There's a couple issues. The cost, obviously, being a self-directed IRA, I only have X number of dollars in the account. I've done over $25,000 of renovation on the house, and I only have about $12,000 left in that self-directed IRA account, so I'm not allowed to put extra outside money into it because it's a violation of the IRA, so I'm very limited in what I can do. My whole goal is to make a house that's livable for low or fixed income tenants, and also that looks nice in the neighborhood. And if you do drive down the street, it's one of the nicer houses on that street. Given those reasons, I respectfully request that the appeal be granted so that I do not have to remove the vinyl siding. The additional concern with that is when you put vinyl siding on, you use ring shank nails. So pulling that siding off with the condition of the asbestos siding already, it will surely shatter those shingles, and it'll be an asbestos mess if we have to pull that off, and a hazard to the community. That's all I have. Thank you.
Does council have any questions of the applicant? Dr. Whitaker?
Yes. I have a question. As far as the condition of the house, what was the Historic Preservation Commission's ruling as far as the condition of the house and what you replaced it with, the vinyl siding?
They said vinyl siding wasn't an approved siding. They said I could have painted the asbestos or I could have removed it and replaced it with wood, but if you probably realize that that is extremely expensive to do, and in a house that I purchased as a rental for $65,000, I'm not going to put $60,000 to $80,000 into renovating the outside as a rental. So again, not knowing that the vinyl was not allowed, or again, so they're historical guidelines. So the guidelines, not true fact, but I didn't know that there was a requirement to get a permit is the bottom line, because the other houses I've renovated, there was never a requirement, but they were not in historic areas.
So what was the condition of the wood? What was the condition of the wood?
Of the asbestos siding?
Right.
Yeah, so the asbestos siding was chipping in many spots, and every time I would go there to check on the house, there was pieces on the ground, so it would chip, and it's just old and it gets brittle after a while.
So that wasn't a wood siding, that was?
No, it was asbestos,
Okay.
an asbestos shingle siding, and over time it gets quite brittle, and if there's storms and branches hit it from the trees, it chips off, and you end up having pieces of asbestos laying on the ground, which in itself isn't a hazard. It's when it starts to break and you get the dust is when you have the hazard.
So what was the standard that was applied to you to say that vinyl could not be used?
So I was told according to the architectural guidelines for the historic district, it says vinyl siding cannot be used. However, like I showed you, there's 19 houses on the 2-block area of just Mount Vernon that have vinyl siding, so I'm not sure how they're applying that, that rule across all the houses. Vinyl siding is a good product, especially the vinyl these days. It's very thick. It's a very good quality product, and it really makes, I think, the houses look nice.
All right, thank you. The chair recognizes Councilman Smith.
Thank you. Good evening. I was reading the information that was given to us, and did you have a permit to do work on a house, period?
No, the work I did on the house was the vinyl siding and the wood on the porch.
Okay.
And I did not have a permit for that. Again, like I had said, I did not realize for vinyl siding that I needed to get one. And the other cities that I've worked in, you don't need it to put vinyl siding on a house.
But you did need some type of permit to do some work on the house. Every city requires that.
Depending on the work that's done. So if you're doing electrical work, plumbing, things like that, a major structure is when you typically need permits. Now, in the historical district, it's completely different. I've learned that since then. I went and read the guidelines, and it's a totally different set of rules on how you have to go about getting permission to do something on a house. So virtually anything you do on the house in a historical district, you have to have permission to do.
And you were ordered to stop work, and you continued to work.
I only continued in that I closed up the holes that rats were getting in to make it a safe environment. The house was like 95% done when I got the stop order. So I had asked my contractor to finish the eaves so that we could keep the rats out. Because even with the traps that I paid monthly for an exterminator to bait, they were still getting in the house. It had to do with the cold weather and everything too. You know, there's bouts of cold weather, then warm weather, and so they were finding their way in and getting into mostly the upstairs unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Good evening. Speak to us about the roof. See where you took the metal roof off. What precipitated that?
So I did not do that, sir. I read that too. The initial, on the October, initially it was the siding and the wood decking. The roof and the windows were actually put in before I purchased the house. And so all I ended up doing was doing the siding and the porch when the porch started to fail.
So you had the roof was there, the porch or the windows
Yes.
were already there
Yes.
when you purchased the house?
Yes, and I removed the tongue and groove porch and I put just normal siding. And I would be more than willing to take that off and put tongue and groove porch back on there.
I was by there today. The salt treated lumber that you put on the porch doesn't look very good at all.
Right.
And that would definitely need to be replaced.
Yeah. And I'm more than willing to replace that with tongue and groove like it was. So.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
Yes, sir. You said you purchased the house in 2011?
No, sir. I purchased it in September 2016.
Okay, 2016. It should have been disclosed in the contract when you were purchasing the house. Were you not aware that it was in the historical district?
No, and I did not purchase it from a realtor. So it was from a real estate investment group.
Okay.
I do have a question. Did you say that you did not replace the windows?
No, I did not.
So the windows are the same windows that were there when you bought the
Yes,
house
yes.
in December 2016?
Yes. The previous owner had put those in at some point, I think probably right before they sold the house, to try to make it more appealing to sell.
Okay. Any other questions of council? Thank you, sir. And now we'll hear from the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission. And again, for the record, would you state your name and address, please, sir?
My name is David Stevenson, and I live at 1 Harbor Court in Portsmouth. This particular case was based entirely on the, first of all, I think the first problem was the building permit. Some of these things, we weren't even, it's not even part of what we were still looking at. We were really looking at the siding, the front porch decking, the windows. We had a concern over However, I'm not sure how far it could go since it was already up there. In a case like that, I'm not sure. It's one over one now, and it was originally, it's supposed to be kept the same type of windows, the original window patterns, which are 2 over 2 and 2 over 1. That's what the house originally had. So apparently the 1 over 1 was put in. There was a removed window, but that has been replaced, so that's not an issue anymore. The vinyl windows, which I did, by the way, look up in the approved materials in the manual, and it does list vinyl windows and siding as a no for use in Port Norfolk. Some of the historic districts do allow it, but Port Norfolk does not. The wrapped siding with the vinyl, vinyl is still one item that is completely off the chart for any siding in Port Norfolk, but it does allow for some other things. But the original wood, or of course asbestos, something like that, is open. As a matter of fact, you could even use aluminum, cementous, and clad. So there are some options, but the vinyl itself is just not an option. The metal roof being removed and architectural shingles being put on, this is something that's actually listed as being discouraged. It doesn't really say no, but it is discouraged because you're supposed to have something as close to the original material as possible, which the architectural shingles are not quite close enough. The changes, of course, were inconsistent with the Port Norfolk Historic District. All the changes were made without the proper permits, and the work was continued despite the issuance of a stop work order. Those were our major concerns and the reason for the denial.
Are you finished?
Yes.
We do have questions, and the chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker, please.
Yes, Mr. Stevenson. Once again, where is the language pertaining to the vinyl siding?
That's in the Port Norfolk Historic, excuse me. It's on page 92.
Yes, I'm reading from our staff summary, and it doesn't mention any of that language in the staff report.
Could you give that to the sergeant of arms so he could just circulate it?
Sure.
Also,
And we'll each take a look.
also, can you show where you're speaking of?
Please. When you get back to the lectern, can you summarize for the public the conversation, please? And Dr. Whitaker, can you pass that down so we can all take a look? Yeah, if you'll summarize for everybody what that discussion was.
Okay. Yeah, it does list on the guidelines materials that can and cannot be used. It'll either say yes or no, or it'll have an H, which means you have to get approval from historic preservation. On the siding, it's clearly an X, which means it's not allowed. And on the windows, it does give an H, which means Historic Preservation Commission has to okay it. In a case like that, it's really precedent where it's based on, or not using vinyl is because the precedent has been that at least since, I'm not sure if it goes back to all the way to the original guidelines in 2008, but it does go back several years to where the vinyl windows have not been allowed.
And so Mr. Stevens, my second question, the applicant, I don't want to mispronounce, is it Mr. Pites? Mr. Pites indicated and gave us a handout showing that throughout the Port Norfolk community, there are houses that have vinyl siding. Are those houses within the historic district? Or have you seen this?
Yes, but what we run into all the time, and it's one of the reasons that I think we do need a review of the guidelines because it has been 10 years since it was done. But also you've got houses that were built and altered before that time, so it doesn't pertain to them. They're grandfathered in. But I think the main thing is whenever you do make an exception, all of a sudden that becomes a precedent. And that's when we end up having someone in the future is going to come to us and say, well, that house at 101, they got it. Why can't I? And we run into this all the time.
So are you saying that the houses that are in this handout, all of those houses were wrapped with vinyl siding prior to there being a guideline in place?
There may be some that are.
Right. So there have already been exceptions then.
Well, no, what I mean is those houses, any of them that had it in before the guidelines were set up 10 years ago, they weren't made to conform to the new.
Right. That's what I was asking. Are all of these houses in the handout that was given, were all of those wrapped prior to the guidelines? Or are some of these houses that were wrapped since there have been guidelines in place?
I'm not sure.
So
I'm sure that probably the majority were already done because.
Well, see, the majority isn't all.
Right.
And so
No,
that's what I'm saying, that if the exception has already occurred, and so how do we determine when to stop once you have the wheel rolling?
And that's really the issue about, making
So
any
how is it that now this applicant gets sanctioned when others have already been permitted to do the same thing?
I'm not sure how many that have been or anything else like that. I just know that we run into it in some neighborhoods. I'm not even saying specifically in Port Norfolk, but I know we have run into it in several of the districts.
What you're saying is that you don't know how those other houses got wrapped, whether they were permitted by the city or not.
No. I mean,
Okay.
we could go back and research it and find
But
out.
you personally don't know.
No.
Okay,
But
let's
even
move on.
even if they weren't permitted by the city, has the city required them to take it off?
Let's park that question. Do you have any other questions? All right. Councilman Moody, you have the floor.
I think the question would be the ones that were wrapped and had the wrong windows, the wrong roofing prior to the historic regulations. Obviously, we're not going to go through and make them take it off to get in compliance. I guess my question to staff is, when somebody purchases one of those homes, I take it that they have to bring it back into the guidelines. Is that an accurate statement?
Can we park that question and keep our questions directed to the chairman for this part?
Okay, I have another question. We're talking about windows and roofing. He's told us that the roof was there when he purchased the house, and also the vinyl windows were there, which kind of falls back to my previous question. Okay, we got a new owner. Things were inappropriate according to the historic standards when this gentleman purchased it. Now, do we go back and make a new buyer, get everything back into a state of appropriateness? At some point, Mayor, we'll need to have staff answer that question.
Right.
The other question is, when you don't get a building permit, and obviously the list of appropriate items doesn't mean anything to the buyer because he didn't get a building permit, so he was oblivious to all of it. But, and we're going to have, and we have had other cases like this, do we just say, okay, you failed to do everything, so just don't do it next time? We've got to come up with some sort of penalty to discourage that from happening in the future. And I know that's for another discussion, but that puts us in a dilemma.
We're in the period of this proceeding where we're asking questions of the chairman. Let's see if there are any other questions of the chairman. These are good points, and let's discuss that during our 10 minutes. Councilman Clark, do you have questions of the chairman?
Yes, sir. And I'd like to direct my colleagues to the packet that we have on our computers, page 23. It's a photograph of the house in question with a couple ladders and an individual up there working on the peak of the house. Do you know if this was taken when the stop work order was done?
I don't personally know.
Okay, because what I'd really like to point out in this picture is there's only 2 upstairs windows and the third was covered. And what I find very interesting is if you look real closely at the 2 windows that are there on the 2nd floor, they're 2 over 2, just like you mentioned before. And the owner says that he did not change any windows, but in the packet that he presented us, it's obviously 1 over 1 windows. So within the same time frame as this siding's being installed, somebody changed those, at least the 2 upstairs windows.
That was one of our points.
Okay. All right. Is that your question?
Yeah, that's why I was asking if he knew when the photograph was taken.
All right.
I'm not sure when I know it was more recent, but I'm not sure exactly when.
Okay. Any other questions of the chairman?
Yes.
Yes. I have a little. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Lucas Burke.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stevens, my question too is relative to the guidelines. If they haven't been reviewed in 10 years, there's definitely something that needs to be done with that.
I agree.
And looking at the packet that we received, it looks like other homes on the street or in the block or in that community that have the vinyl siding. I don't see how we can discriminate or be discrepant against one tenant. In Portsmouth, we want to encourage homeowners, and we want to try to do everything that we can to encourage them to stay within the city. If Mr. Pikes wasn't familiar with the guidelines that go into a historic community, then maybe we need to do more coaching to try to encourage more homeowners or to encourage other buyers to purchase in our communities. And of course, if it was an asbestos type siding and going into replacing with a hardy plank or some other type of wood surface would be costly to a buyer. And I just wondered if there was any kind of reference to hardships of this nature. If you have something, who wants to move in a house that's asbestos filled or anything that could be harmful to any tenant that would be living in there, low income or fixed income or any other income. So just, I think there's something that needs to be done with the guidelines. I think, this is a coachable moment, a teachable moment for all of us to, maybe, give someone a pass and let them know maybe there should be some type of class or some type of training when people are purchasing in a historic district on the guidelines that they need to follow so that we're aware, but not discourage homeowners in Portsmouth. But
good point. Let's direct our questions to the chairman. Councilman Smith, do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I just want to make comment to.
Can you hold that to our discussion? I want to make sure that we allow him a chance to sit down.
Okay, all right.
All right. Dr. Whitaker, you have
Yes.
a question?
Mr. Stevenson, the purpose of the guidelines from the committee's perspective is to maintain the historic nature of the communities.
Right.
Question then, with there already being homes that have been wrapped in vinyl siding, has that detracted from the historic nature of that community?
It can, and of course, there's questions also about the dependability as far as when moisture and air and this type of thing. Some things that we've got have said that, well, the manual itself that I passed around even states that moisture can be a problem with vinyl siding. Excuse me. I think it probably means according to what kind of siding and whether it's layered, you know, where there can be openings or something like that. I'm not sure, but that's the main reason they give in the manual, which is based on the national recommendations. And
I was curious because we've had 2 investors that have appeared before us today that have committed to putting significant funds into a historic neighborhood, and I'm just curious, has that detracted, and evidently it doesn't appear to have, because I've heard council members speak to the beauty of some of the homes.
My answer would be that the main times that we run into that objection is when it is being bought as a rental property. We've got other people that other property owners and purchasers that have come in and they understand that it's historic and that it does cost more to maintain and to bring them up to standard. We've even had 2 houses that we just approved recently in Old Town. One in Old Town for solar panels to be put in. And, you know, as long as they can't be seen, that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's things like that that have to be taken into account. And a lot of it has to do with if it can't be seen from the street. If you're on a corner, you've got 2 streets to worry about. But if it can't be seen from the street, like if it's something that can only be seen from the back of the house, it doesn't matter as much to us.
Right. Well, my concern and question you is that there have been cases that have come before council on appeal where there have been owners who use materials on the homes in historic districts, and those materials had not been approved by the guidelines, but yet council still approved the use of those materials. Even though the guidelines did not allow for that. We had a discussion on that yesterday. And so it would seem to me inconsistent that we have already approved projects for materials that weren't even in the guidelines, and they were allowed to be put on homes, and then you have persons coming and now they're being told to take items off because they were not in the guidelines. That, right. To me, that's inconsistent.
Thank you. Any other questions of the chairman? All right, sir, you may sit down. Councilman Clark did ask the question, and I'll allow the applicant to answer that question. Just
Councilman Clark, I saw the picture you're talking, and it does look like it has the 2/2. The window's open, the bottom window's open halfway, and it's creating that look. If you look at the page in your packet that has the Google map of the original house, I looked this up too, the 2/2 is actually a vertical 2/2, not a horizontal in the original house. And so the picture you were looking at, the window was opened halfway, creating the appearance of a style there.
all right. Thank you, sir. You may be. All right. So it's now our turn to discuss this matter, and we follow the Roberts Rules of Order. So in order for us to put this before us, is there a motion one way or the other?
I move that we approve the applicant's request.
Second.
We have a motion that's been made, which is to approve the applicant's request, which is to go against the recommendation of the Historic Preservation Commission. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion. And the chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm all right with that. I think removing the vinyl siding, as the applicant stated, would do further damage and probably fall into the category of hardship like we were talking about. at the work session yesterday, but he did put the wrong material on the porch. I was there this morning. It doesn't look good. It's the wrong material. I'm okay with approving it with that proffer that he would have to replace the wood on the porch, front porch.
Are you amending the motion?
I'm amending the motion.
Okay. Now, to explain what we have a motion to approve. Councilman Moody has offered an amendment to that motion that we add the condition which was proffered by the applicant that the porch be replaced with tongue and groove. Is everybody clear on the amendment?
Clear.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, on the amendment. And I'll take them as they appeared. Councilman Smith, on the amendment.
No, my light was on for the motion.
Okay. Councilman Clark, on the amendment.
In reference to the amendment, I'm not in favor of the amendment. And the reason being is using the defense that I don't know is not appropriate. The fact that he should have been notified when he purchased the house and the contract paperwork, and as the owner of the property, he should have done his due diligence. And the fact that if we go forward and allowing that vinyl siding to stay on that house, that will allow anybody in Port Norfolk or other historical districts to have a contractor come on Saturday and clad their house in vinyl siding when no inspectors are working, and we'll find ourselves in the same place. So this motion and a second totally undermines the reason of having a historical neighborhood, which covers all of our historical neighborhoods in the city, and it just undermines it. So if you're just going to allow somebody that says, I didn't know and I did it on the weekend, to continue forward, we have no reason to have a historical district. I'm very familiar with this historical district. I grew up in Port Norfolk. The house I grew up in had asbestos shingles on the side, and it had a slate roof. So I'm very familiar with the situation. So I'm against the motion and the amendment.
Okay, but we're discussing the amendment only, not the main motion. So limit your discussion to the amendment, which is to amend the main motion to put a condition that the porch be replaced with tongue and groove as proffered by the applicant. Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, hearing none. Ready? We're voting on the amendment. If the amendment passes, then we'll discuss the amended motion. All in favor of the amendment, please vote yes. If you're opposed, vote no. And the amendment passes. So the motion before us is to approve the request with the condition that the porch be replaced with tongue and groove as opposed to what is currently there. Is everybody clear on the motion?
No.
All right, I'll restate it. The motion is to approve, to go against the denial, the applicant's request with the condition that he replace the porch with tongue and groove material. Now, is everybody clear? Is that's your amendment? That's what we voted on. Okay, now we'll have a discussion on the current motion, and the chair recognizes Councilman Smith.
Thank you. Again, I don't buy, I didn't know either. When you are, anyone that has been in this area any length of time knows, I believe, historic areas, especially if you intend to invest money in, you're not going to just arbitrarily do that without doing some homework. I don't buy that. Also, we need to understand what grandfather means. There's this discussion about houses before the guidelines. Grandfather means grandfather. That means they're protected. That means they don't have to come back and change it and redo it. That's what grandfathers mean. And anything that we do, unless it's specified, that you can, put grandfather, a clause in there where you can lay certain things aside, but grandfather means grandfather. So that's why the others are like that. But again, I'm opposed to it, and I understand the hardship, but it's just not. I feel that it's not an excuse, and when you make a grave mistake like that, it's consequences to be paid. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, just want to remind colleagues that Mr. Stevenson was not definite as far as whether those homes were actually grandfathered in. Also, I think there has to be some common sense approach to it as well, because we have already noted that there are homes in the historic district with vinyl. And then secondly, if we're going to require this applicant to remove an item, the vinyl, from the home because it's not in the guidelines, then once again, we already have precedent where we allowed homeowners to use materials that were not in the guidelines, and this council approved it. And I would just say we might want to be cautious about being arbitrary and inconsistent like that.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Councilman, well, I'm going to pick somebody that hasn't spoken. Vice Mayor Simmons. And then I'll get Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to vote against this motion. You know, I could live with the vinyl because it's already there. But the fact that you never got a building permit at all, I never heard of anywhere where you're going to completely change the exterior of your house and don't go get a building permit. That really bothers me. And then you get a stop work order and you keep going. Then you cover up a window. It's just too many things over and over again. The house certainly looks better now, especially with the third window upstairs opened back up again. But the reason we have these rules is to follow these rules. And I cannot imagine whoever did the closing on your house in 2016 didn't provide the historic district information to you, because that was the law in 2016. So I'm going to vote against the entire thing.
Okay. Chair recognizes Councilman Moody.
I'm gonna vote for it as previously stated, but we do have a problem, and that's when people come before this body, and now we faced with potentially telling them to take the vinyl off, which is going to further damage the house. That creates a hardship, but there's no penalty. So we, at the proper time, we need to strategize. What are we going to do? There needs to be a penalty for people who fail to get building permits, and this has occurred in other places other than historic districts. This has occurred in commercial districts where people do work on the weekends and it's not inspected, and we don't make them tear out the renovations. So we have a problem, and we need to deal with it, and we need to set some parameters either in the ordinance of what's going to happen if you fail to get a building permit and you do work on the weekend trying to circumvent that. And I think the word is out on the street that on the weekend inspectors aren't on the street, and we need to address that as well. I'm gonna vote for this only because I think it does create a hardship. A reference taking the siding off and further damage in the house. He is going to have to replace the front porch, and the vinyl windows and the roofing was done prior to him purchasing the house. So
Councilman,
I'll vote yes.
Okay, Councilman Moody, after we take action on this matter, whichever way it goes, would you seek the consensus of council, direct the city manager to study the issue that you just raised?
Absolutely.
Okay. Please bring that up once we conclude the action. The chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
Yes, reference to this, and I just want to reiterate on what I had previously stated, but with this motion, colleague Councilman Moody just stated about a penalty. The penalty should be removing that siding. We have somebody that came through the city, did not get a building permit, should have been aware of the historical district, chose to keep going, got a stop order, keep going. So if there's any hardship, that hardship was self-inflicted. This totally undermines our ordinances. It undermines all of the citizens that we have appointed to this commission, and it undermines the entire historical district. So if you know, people vote to leave it because, oh, he didn't know and put the vinyl siding there, then you might as well just let everybody in all the historical districts go ahead and start putting vinyl siding up. Because if the defense is, I didn't know, and you say, okay, go ahead with it, then everybody from this point forward that says, I didn't know and put one piece of siding up, it's in the same position. So I don't think it's fair to the people in the past that have followed the guidelines, and I don't think it's fair to the people in the future that will have to adhere to the guidelines by purchasing a house in these specific areas.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Dr. Whitaker.
Yeah, so I'm just curious with what Councilman Clark is recommending. Then should council go back and research those homes that have put vinyl siding on it since the guidelines were passed, and then require them to tear the vinyl siding off?
Councilman Clark.
In reference to that, as what Councilman Smith stated, they're grandfathered in. As I stated, I grew up in Port Norfolk, so a lot of the houses had vinyl siding put on them prior to it being designated as a historical neighborhood.
I'm talking about since then.
All right. Councilman Moody, you have the floor.
I think the question there is, what's grandfathered? Is the owner grandfathered, or is the house grandfathered to perpetuity? I think we need to settle that as well. If it changes ownership and the new owner wants to do some renovations, can they put any material on there, or is it the house that's grandfathered? And that may be a legal question.
Okay, let's park that too. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. If you're in favor of the motion, which is to approve the request from the applicant with the condition that he replace the porch with tongue and groove material, if you're in favor of that motion, please vote yes. Opposed, no. And Madam Clerk, that motion passes. Okay. Just as a, do you have something to seek consensus of council for the city manager on work done without a building permit?
Yes, I'd like for staff to come back with some recommendations on what we can do as a council, as a city, for people who do work without building permits.
Do we have a consensus for that?
And that, you know, do we make them tear down the work they've done, or is there a stiff penalty to get their attention? Well, they won't do it again.
All right. You're seeking council's concurrence that we ask the city manager to study this issue and bring back alternatives that may be available for us, if there are any. Thank you. Dr. Whitaker.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Moody. I think that there should be appropriate consequences for ignoring the requirement, but not an undue hardship.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I think we have consensus. We do have consensus. Dr. Patton, are you clear? I did see the chairman come back in. Are we ready to consider the first item? I know, but we can. Can you give us a report on what you found? Dr. Patton?
Vice Mayor, members of council, Mrs. Alden-Dubois will make her presentation from her visit.
All right, good evening. Jocelyn Dubois, Planning Manager. I did go out and look at the windows, and it's my determination it is not the window that we had initially approved. We had approved a composite window with a simulated divided light. A simulated divided light would be you can see the grids here, okay? Then would have, you have a grid here, and a spacer. That's a simulated divided light, and that's what we approved. The reason we approved that, so that it looks more like a historic wonder when you have this exterior grid. What he put in was an interior, a grid between the glass. Now, that's just 2 panes of glass with a grid between it. It looks totally different from this from the street. And we had a lot of calls from the neighborhood saying, why are you allowing him to put those windows in? Because they know that what is required. And this is not, the grid between the glass is not what we allow. A composite, it's okay. Aluminum clad, vinyl clad. And we actually, before you put the window in, come in and let us see it or bring us the specs. This person did not do that. We started off with a start work order, was starting to work without coming in and getting any permits. So when he came in, he finally said, Jocelyn, give me the company. I gave him a company. He said, okay, I'm going to go with this. So I said, fine. I issued a certificate, didn't go back to the HPC because he told me he was going to put those windows in, which is a composite with a 3-part construction, exterior grid, interior grid, and a spacer. That's not what went in.
Okay. Any questions? All right,
Yeah, I did have a question.
Yes, sir. Dr. Whitaker.
Mr. Duma, do you have the documentation so that we can see that specified exterior grid so that we can all be on one accord?
Could you speak in the mic, please? We're going to honor, as a point of order, we're going to honor the motion as adopted by council, which is to consider this at 7 o'clock. We're hearing now just the report of your findings. Okay.
I just for clarity, I was asking if it referenced exterior versus interior. This doesn't, unless I'm looking at, just says simulated divided lights.
That's what a simulated divided light is.
But that doesn't say exterior or interior.
Let's have this discussion over microphones so that we can let the public hear it. Let's
Go to the microphone and speak, please, so that everyone can hear.
There is a reference on it to a white exterior and a white interior.
Right, it has both here.
Yes.
Right.
So
It
that's
doesn't
what,
exclude one or the other. The way it reads, it could be either or.
no, there's no, a simulated divided light is an either or. There's your grid between the glass, grid, 2 pieces of glass. Simulated divided light, you have your interior grid and your exterior grid. Then you have your true divided light with, you have your panes.
Thank you. All right, again, we'll consider this matter at 7 o'clock. That was the motion. And we have concluded our business here. And Dr. Patton, you have a couple more items, correct? Yes. Okay, we'll quickly change venue from here to the council conference room.
I know, I just texted you.
You know, like you miss
All right, we're still in session, everybody, so if you will sit.
You can go towards your place where you're going to present. You go up there and sit over there. He belongs to the
Oh, that's right, yes. Dr. Whitaker? You all see Dr. Whitaker out here? Oh, I'm sorry. Restroom.
Yeah, I think that's what
Nathan did too.
I didn't know that was.
Just for everybody's information, we were going to have a closed session just for boards and commissions, but we don't need to take any action.
Crazy she.
The whole damn place is crazy. We're in session, everybody talking.
Are we ready to go? Are we ready to go on the
I'm
video?
ready, Mayor.
Okay.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam signed the state budget bill on June 7, 2018 for Medicaid expansion. The expansion is estimated to provide health insurance coverage for up to an additional 400,000 people, with 4,000 being within the city of Portsmouth. This evening, Mrs. Pamela Littlehill will provide a presentation on Medicaid expansion using the newest state's PowerPoint that will be made available to and on the city's website after the presentation to City Council this evening. And that is what the state has asked for us to do. Mrs. Littlehill.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council. As Dr. Patton mentioned, I'm going to provide you with the latest updates that DSS received regarding Medicaid expansion. Virginians between the ages of 19 and 64 will be able to visit their doctor for preventive care, which should aid in the improvement of their health. The silhouette below highlights some of the changes at a glance. It represents current regulations regarding Medicaid eligibility versus the changes that will be effective as of January 1st. If you refer to the silhouette below, childless adults were previously not eligible and will now become eligible if their income is at or below $16,000 and $16,704. For a family of 3, previous eligibility income was $6,900, and as of January 1st, this was raised to $28,677. Persons with disabilities' annual income limits will also increase up to $16,754. The primary populations most affected by Medicaid expansion will be persons with disabilities. So there is an increase from 80% to 138% below the federal poverty level. The other population would be working parents, with an increase from 52% to 138% below the federal poverty level, and childless adults who are new to this, and they will be assessed at 138% below the current federal poverty level.
We ask questions as you go along.
You sure can.
Can you go back to the previous slide? Is it a sliding scale based on the family size? Would the income go up if it was a family of 4?
I wouldn't call it a sliding scale. They're very specific, and as the incomes go up, past 8 individuals in a family, you will have to add an additional $497.
So the income level increases as the family
size increases, correct.
And so we're just using this slide as to demonstrate.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Were there any questions on this slide? If not,
There you go.
There you go.
The chart represented below, again, is an example of what those income ranges would look like, and that's where you note that it says an additional $497 would be added to each individual. Medicaid expansion may now offer opportunities for health insurance to include individuals who work in retail, construction, childcare, landscaping, and food service. The new coverage will include regular preventive care as well as treatment for chronic health conditions. Some of the frequently asked questions.
I have a question. Again.
Sure. Want me to go back?
Why did they designate those particular careers?
That's what I asked.
Those were some of the careers that most commonly would not offer insurance. So a lot of people who work in retail, example, they may work part-time and not full-time hours.
So that's written into the act?
This is just saying that some of these positions, these people may now be eligible depending on if they meet the requirements. Some of the commonly asked questions would be, will I be able to get health coverage if I have a pre-existing condition? And the answer is yes, as long as you meet other qualifications. Will I be able to keep up with my current doctor? Yes, with some limited expectations. You'll be asked to choose a plan for the coordination of your care and consult with your physician to find out if they are participating in the plan you selected. How will my doctor know that I have coverage? You will be mailed a health card. Will I be required to meet additional requirements for coverage? Virginia is in the process of developing new programs that will include workforce training and education. And for preparation, DSS's preparation for Medicaid expansion, the Department of Social Services, the Department of Medical Assistance is currently in the process of still writing those regulations. So at this point, DSS is not familiar with all the regulations that will come into play. They will offer us training after the regulations are written in October of the coming year. Portsmouth was allocated $299,000 and $155,000 for additional administrative funding to assist in the planning for the increased volume of Medicaid applications. The state anticipates an influx of applications of 4,400 for Portsmouth citizens.
And the staffing up that we are going to do is primarily related to determining eligibility. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, the funding that we're getting this year does not require a local match for right now, but for fiscal year 2020, there will be a local match.
What's the order of magnitude of that?
Well, if this is the amount of money, what is it? What is the match? 10%? 15%.
Okay.
Current SNAP recipients, go back, I was still on that. Current SNAP recipients will be assessed by the state for eligibility determination, and the state, if they're automatically enrolled in SNAP, will actually contact those individuals via postcard. And if they sign the postcard saying that they want to be enrolled into Medicaid expansion, the state will automatically enroll those individuals. It will not be from the DSS site. It'll probably happen from Richmond. DSS.
What does SNAP stand for?
I was going to say.
Say that again.
Because we're being televised.
What does SNAP stand for?
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Food stamps.
Formerly food stamps.
Okay.
DSS has been tasked with notifying our communities about the Medicaid expansion. We are currently in the process of collaborating with the Department of Health, the Department of Behavioral Health, libraries. We do have a marketing strategy to get the word out. What we like to do is encourage as many citizens to take advantage of the opportunity.
Is there a deadline to sign up?
There isn't a deadline given to us as of yet.
And all this starts on 2019, is that correct?
Yeah, January
It
1st,
was January 1st.
Yes.
2019.
That is the target date as we know right now.
Raise your hand up.
Yeah, just curious, Dr. Patton, you gave us the figure on 4,400.
Right.
I'm just curious if we could get the figures now that it's going to be a possible appointment of Judge Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court, and there is significant discussion about the Affordable Care Act being in jeopardy. How many persons will be impacted if that is repealed?
Okay, we can get that information. About 6 or 7 months ago, we gave you a report on the Medicaid and how many citizens we own. We'll update and get that back to you.
If it's repealed,
how many will be impacted?
What would be the number of persons impacted?
We can get that.
Well, it would affect.
Yes.
One of the things I wanted to say to council in regard to the Medicaid now and the January 1, we're going to have to do a lot to get our citizenry to understand this opportunity. A postcard is not going to do it. I've said to Dr. James, and she has a new community health advisor that will be out in our communities. We'll be working with civic leagues, but we're going to have to get social services, behavior care, and we're going to have to get out in the community, help our citizenry understand. We had a discussion earlier in the week, or it was yesterday, at our meeting, that for some reason our citizens have been hesitant based on old myths as to why they won't sign up. For example, there was a period of time, they're going to still ask information, but just working with students and knowing there was a period of time that even many of our children who qualify for Medicaid are not signed up because they have this myth that you've got to identify or say who your father is. And you have children who say, well, I really don't know who my father is, so my mother's never filled out the form. But those kinds of things are myths. We can get our persons on these programs by working and dismissing and working with them. So, Council, we're going to work very hard to try to reach our 4,400.
But we know who's on staff, don't we? I mean, we have our own role, correct?
These are people that are, these 4,400 names have come from the state. They may not be on our SNAP.
But if I understood you correctly, you said if a person is on SNAP, they immediately automatically qualify.
They will assess them to see if they qualify, and if they do,
They will assess them.
they will assess them for qualifications. If they do, they will do an automatic enrollment, but they have to sign the correspondence that's going to be sent to them. When they receive that back, they'll take that as if you want the Medicaid expansion.
These 4,000 are new.
Are we working with the schools to get that information out?
That is also part of our plan. We plan to hit PTA meetings. We plan to do forums. We plan to contact faith-based community. We're going to create a lot of venues so that we can get the word out. We're going to go to them as well as have them to come to the DSS office.
That's on our agenda next week with Dr. Grace.
Both of you?
Yeah.
I defer to the lady.
Yes.
Well, that was my question, because I didn't know how the state determined how the 4,400 came into place. So I just wondered what avenues they used, and then she answered what we're going to do in order to, because there may be some other people who need this service.
I can answer some of that.
Right.
In giving us the allocation and looking at numbers, the state actually keeps a spreadsheet, a chart, a graph that is ongoing in terms of how many people currently receive SNAP, how many pregnant women we have, income levels. And those reports, we usually get an extensive one annually. We haven't received the last one yet, but we usually get those. In terms of even looking at the funding that they thought we would need as it relates to those 4,400 people, they decided that based on historical staff and operation costs. They looked at the projection and the workload due to expansion, and there was a distribution of current funding versus the current workload for benefits programs. So they come up with these figures. It doesn't mean that they're actually going to be written in stone. A lot of times there's leeway when we need more money for certain things. We have to present what our case is in Portsmouth. But that is what they call just an estimate of what they're saying that we would get.
And I presume, I figure our numbers may be double,
That's
So
what
is
Dr.
the
Patton
state,
said.
prepared to, I mean, are we
Well,
gonna get the
yesterday.
additional, assistance?
I
to-
think with education to the public, as Dr. Patton was saying, is going to be our best method to get people signed up. It doesn't mean, and that was a conversation that we had, that the state would not ask where the biological father is. That's part of the application process, but it doesn't deter you from being eligible for benefits. It just means if they found out that there was a father who was able-bodied and working elsewhere, the state is going to recoup funds, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply.
That's it.
Bill?
Is there a proof of citizenship as one of the
No.
enrollment requirements?
That was not something that I noted, but I will check and I can get back to
Yeah,
you.
because that can really drive up the cost, which also means, a lot of people say the cost is going to be much higher than projected. Hopefully the state won't do like they do a lot of programs that they support. And when they find out the cost is astronomical, they shift it back to the localities. We certainly need to be on our guard with that as well.
Very good presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, tonight you have 3 items on the City Manager's report. The first is an adoption of an ordinance accepting a public safety answering point grant in the amount of $2,000 from the Virginia 9-1-1 Service Board and appropriating said amount in the FY19 Grants Fund for use for the Portsmouth Police Department in training. The second is an adoption of an ordinance accepting with appreciation a donation of $100 from the Green Acres Presbyterian Church and appropriating said funds in the FY 2019 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Social Services to support operations and service intake unit. The third is an adoption of an ordinance accepting $554,762 in additional funding from the Virginia Department of Education and appropriating said amount to the FY 2019 Portsmouth Public Schools General Fund budget. Those are your
Okay, go
three
ahead.
items.
Any questions about this? All right, while we're on the agenda, let's talk about adding the procedure we're going to use to add this item. Before the public hearing, I'll ask for a motion to add an item to the agenda. And so somebody will make a motion that we add the application that was tabled. We'll get a second.
Is that the 101 Mount Vernon?
101, Mount Vernon. And then we'll consider that after 18266. Is that a good procedure, Madam City Clerk?
I would recommend, if you're going to add it at that point to the agenda, to go ahead and deal with it,
Okay, that's fine.
unless you're going to deal
I
with the
think that's
whole
fair.
thing.
No, because the applicant is here, and we said 7 o'clock. We want to make them,
Wait till 9:07.
very good point. Okay, is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay?
Is that, will there be public comment?
Well, that was my
No,
next.
because it's a continuation from your hearing you had earlier, and we don't allow public comment at that time.
Everybody good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, Dr. Pat?
I would just say, Mayor, that in the city clerk indicated that the report back from June 25th and the report back from June 26th is in your box. And I would ask that you read if you have any questions, just to highlight one that was asked, and I was not present at the 7 o'clock meeting. The question was asked for the city manager to get with the school superintendent regarding the schedule for the 2019 allocations of funds. Dr. Brace indicated that the June 30th is fine with he, and he spoke with his CFO. So the schedule that they have, there's no problems with the time frame.
So we
It
don't
doesn't
need-
affect them at all, he indicated. Okay? So
Any questions from that?
they're not in front, they're in the box, and you all haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Any questions for what you just said?
Oh, okay.
All right. Let's take city council liaison reports. Anything else that you want to add?
No, sir. That
Okay.
was it.
Bill? Lisa? I'm happy to report that at the last meeting of the Board of HRT, we elected Brad Hunter as vice chair, which means that he'll be the next chairman. he first said no, that he, well, not to vice chair, that he did not want to be reappointed. He's the governor's appointment. And twisted his arm almost out of socket, and I thought maybe I had failed, but he's agreed. And so I think this is great. He'll make a great chairman. He'll make a great vice chairman too, so that's good news for us.
Very nice.
Yes, sir.
No, it's just the report back, you said that is located where?
It's under your PowerPoint presentations.
All right, no further reports?
Okay.
Let's adjourn the work session, and we'll have dinner, and we'll start promptly at 7.